about tax reform. This is a most important topic. It's the ultimate public policy question beyond maybe strategic security. But taxation means how to raise the government revenues, how to share the burden of the public costs and the public good on the population, and how really to be an efficient and strong, powerful state, and how to secure prosperity. That's a very, very important question. And I call on Europe to close the gap in prosperity with the United States of Europe, of America, because why should we as EU be so much poorer than the United States, than of Americans? Yeah? That's really not acceptable. And one of the main reasons is because we have the wrong taxation system. Obviously, also we spend too much. I will come to that point as well. We have too much state-driven economy in Europe, but especially in Western Europe. But the main problem is the progressivity of our income tax. And look at it. The Americans also have progressive income taxation, but look at the enormous differences when exactly which level of income it kicks in. It's quite striking. Even the French have a better system than the Austrians and the Germans. Look, for example, when you have 50,000 euros or dollars, let's say approximately, it's a quite similar exchange rate, yeah, and sum of money. And ultimately, you are at 30% income taxation in France, yeah, and in Germany, please. You have to see the facts, yeah. It's really at 50,000. This is exactly here in the center. You are at 42 already. That's 12 percentage points higher, and you have to pay the solidarity tax for Eastern Germans for the unity. Amazing unity, but that adds up to 47.5. So compare it. It's like already much higher than France at a 50,000 yearly income, yeah. And that's, let's say, that's the better middle class, yeah. Also in France, also in Germany, and also in Austria. We just have announced a tax reform in Austria, and then you will have only 20% as the lowest income tax. It's a very social democratic form of tax reform, which Chancellor Kurz, supposedly from the EPP, he has done that. But that's for the income bracket of 11,000 to 18,000. Look, when you have 50,000 yearly income, you are already in the 42 income bracket. Yeah? And then it goes up after 60, it goes to 48 already. And now come over to the United States of America, and you see that here you have a 22 percentage income bracket for a single taxable income of 40 to 80,000, yeah. And then similar levels. The highest level of income tax progressivity is 37. That's for people who earn more than half a million US dollar. I mean, in Austria, the level of 50%, let's say the equivalent of 37 is reached also already for people who earn more than 18,000. Yeah, unbelievable, 18,000. Via 12, that's 1,500 euros around in the month. Yeah? That's about everybody who works, yeah, full time. And so the situation is that they pay as much, 35%, as Americans pay when they earn over half a million US dollars. Yeah? And come back to the French where it is here. The number is, for the middle class, let's say, it's 47,000 yearly income, 30%. And then at this age, 75, it goes to 41. 41. So it's totally unfair what the Austrians and Germans are doing in income taxation progressivity, because they kick in much too early for really like treating a normal person as a super rich American. That's totally unfair, and I really cannot understand it. And it's an ultimate problem I am working on 20 years. I fight against the Austrian tax system, against the German tax system, against this high level of progressivity. I understand there can be some arguments made for progressivity, and I will discuss about it. But that kind of progressivity, to treat everybody in the middle class, yeah, as a kind of a super rich person, I mean, and I ask basically half of the salary from them. is totally unfair, and it's really condemning the middle class always, to keep up the system just to survive and to be okay, sure. But, you cannot have social mobility with that kind of system. That's really wrong, and it's an outrage, yeah. Anyhow, let's come to the presentation. That was the entry point, and I will discuss now about the whole philosophy of the current economic challenges which we have, especially when it comes to taxation and to public debt and what to do about it. Yeah, because now I would like to reiterate, it's quite spectacular. And I'm actually supporting it. It's very good. The state, powerful, is ready to invest and to counter external shock, like a terror shock or a natural disaster like Corona. This is why we have this solidarity instrument of the state, and this is also, I think, it's good. We now take additionally debt instruments or similar economic measures of 4.2 trillion according to the EU Commission, mobilized by the member states and by the EU in this unprecedented effort of mutualizing in Europe 750 billion. But also the member states are taking, because they are the biggest economic actors, obviously, like all the member states together, they take another 3 trillion of support from the side of Germany, France, all the member states, the 27 of the European Union. And that's very good. I'm totally thinking that, in an unprecedented shock, we have a terrible crisis of economic demand falling out because of the lockdowns, then we help. But now, of course, it's the question how to rebate this debt, how to really reduce it. Because, just then we will be all at 100 or 110. Even Germany has now made the latest assessment that it will be at 80% of GDP debt level, and after 2021, yes, okay, but that's the most successful member state, the strongest member state, the biggest volume. When you go then in the more fragile states like Italy, Spain, and everybody, like the French and the harder hit ones, that's already like Greece, it will be quite dramatic how high it is in relation to the GDP. And I would estimate we will overall in Europe reach closer to 100, from 80 to 100. Hopefully not 110. That would only be the case if really all these 4.2 trillion are mobilized and spent and transformed into debt. Yeah, that's the worst case scenario. But let's hope that we have some wisdom and start to privatize some of the assets. At least to pool it at the European Investment Bank and to Europeanize it. I made a separate video about that one already. But what is very important is that we start to sell some stuff. We don't need all these energy companies, infrastructure companies, the mining companies, much too much property in public hands. It's really quite amazing that, we are now 40 years after Maggie Thatcher started her privatization revolution, and still the European assets are estimated somewhere in the 16 trillion, including the UK, but probably now 15 trillion. The exact amount is very hard to evaluate all over the EU 27, but it's enormous amounts of assets in land, in infrastructure, in public companies, in utility companies. So much from Italy to Romania to Germany, defense industries. Some things can be maybe justified. I don't say everything has to be sold. But, to start a big privatization wave and to reduce the equity stakes of the state in the big utility companies via IPOs. That would revitalize the European economy and the shareholding public, and everybody would be much better off by paying much less debt levels after this corona crisis. So I think what is central, and that is the core of the message here, in that we need higher growth rates in Europe. Because we have already, after the great financial crisis of 2008, not really recovered very well, because our policies is not directed to growth. We do a lot of climate and we do a lot of other important things. They are all important. I'm not one of the persons to talk negatively about the climate, but it's not the highest priority. The highest priority must be growth. Growth is livelihood of the people. It's nothing bad. It's income of the people. It's very good. It's prosperity for everybody. If we have lower growth, we have unemployment. We have poverty. We have crisis. We have conflict between different segments of the society. That's really very bad. We need a constant good and higher growth rate, similar like the United States of America and other parts of the world. And that is also the key to reduce then the relative ratio between debt and growth. If we stagnate economically, keep the debt level, and it will be always higher because of the interest rates, obviously. Yeah? They are a bit lower now, the interest rates, but the mechanics of reducing the GDP to debt only works if the GDP outgrows is higher than the debt growth. And that I think we do have to understand and explain. And I have very simple here translated what we basically need to do. We need to enlarge the European Union, include Ukraine. That's very important. More unity in the European Union. We need more openness. That's state of the EU trade. Conclude the Mercosur, the African, the ASEAN, and the American free trade agreements. We need lower taxes, obviously, and income and corporate. We need also more openness. We anyhow need more people in Europe. And then do all this kind of massive, expensive, and very brutal, inhumane policy against poor people who are fleeing from a terrible dictator. It's utterly wrong. It's utterly wrong. I cannot really understand what we are doing on these Greek islands. Yeah, it's very terrible, inhumane policy, and it's economically utter nonsense. I made a separate video on that policy as well. And the most conclusive and important one is the prosperity, and that means GDP per capita in net terms, compared between the United States of America, it's the upper line, and the European Union. And you see, we tried to catch up in the 2000s. Yeah? It was relatively good period for Europe because of enlargement, because of reforms, because of the euro. And then 2008, yeah, we had unfortunately the wrong policy afterwards. Yeah, we were not open enough. We cancelled the TTIP agreement. Yeah, we did not have big openness. Yeah, we really had not the right answer, and we didn't reduce taxes, contrary to other parts of the world. And the Americans were also more united. They could address the global financial crisis better and faster. And they have been relatively stable, to grow up again. And we are stagnating in GDP per capita since a decade. And that leads also to this populist uprising, to the problems we face, because we are starting now a distribution struggle, because we are not growing enough. And that's very bad. Obviously, I'm pretty well aware, and I have made several videos already, that it's not only taxation the question, And I have made this from last year when Mr. Moscovici and better times were still around, not him personally, but the growth forecasts. But already there, I'm understanding very much. We need to address the Southern European growth crisis. Yeah? We need to complete the internal market. We need to enlarge. We need a pan-European labor market. We need more defense unity and defense integration. We need to build infrastructure in Eastern Europe. We need to enlarge the Eurozone, reduce our dependency from Russia. We need to Europeanize our public companies, European SME policy, agency against corruption, open Europe towards Mercosur and the Americans and ASEAN. And we need more regional support, more federalism. That means power to the regions. We need also a Green Deal, yeah, but a reasonable one. And we need the digitalization, more cohesion, complete the internal market, and we need more unity, and so on and so on. I understand it. It's not only taxation. But we have one of the most complicated tax systems in the world. We have several states which are really very complex tax system, and taxation is the one single issue we can really change politically easily. Because it's just a vote in a parliament, it's boom, make a majority, reduce the tax rate, reform the complexity of corporation tax, get these things politically solved. It's not so complicated ultimately. And it's ultimately the biggest question, how to finance the public good, the public welfare, and we can do it more efficient without much more complexity, and we can learn from other countries in the world, and that will lead to a lot of relief of this blockage which we have unfortunately in Europe right now. In Eastern Europe, obviously, and in Central and Eastern Europe, that's my special part of activity in the last 20 years, I have to say we have done a lot of progress already. In the Balkans, a lot of countries listened to that advice and they have reduced the tax rate to 10%, the corporation tax I talk now. Bosnia, Montenegro 9%, North Macedonia 10%, Republic of Kosovo 10%. There is really massive progress. Also, even in Central Asia, Uzbekistan, amazing. Kyrgyzstan, amazing, 10%. Moldova for 12%. Less active they have been in the Eastern Partnership, and also we have less positive results. Huh? The Irish have done it very good with 12.5. Yeah. Also, Poland has a SME tax now for 9%, very good, but they still have the 19% for corporations. Yeah, they are like a little bit populist, unfortunately. And then Hungary is on that tax. They have been really very good. We have to also say where Hungary did good policy to reduce the corporation tax on to 9% was really good. Hungary, and that's also one of the reasons why Hungary and Fidesz has so much support, yeah? Because they really have done the essential issue here excellently. And there's many other things I'm totally unhappy about Hungary. You can see the specific video on that one. But on tax, that was very good. And then income tax. See as well here. We have 10% maximum in Kosovo, in Macedonia, 10%, North Macedonia, Albania, the biggest tax increase, unfortunately, in 2014 when Rama and the left swept to power and they imposed this terrible and progressive tax system again. Then in Bosnia, very good. Montenegro, very good. Serbia, not so good. On the lower income, they have 10%, but then they added up to 20, similar like Albania. Romania, excellent. That's one of the key reasons Romania is doing so well. Also, Hungary with 15% flat tax for income, very good. Bulgaria, obviously a superstar. Croatia, not so much. And then, obviously, in Moldova, Ukraine, they not really ever could come over, despite massive efforts of my side, to a decent tax system on income. But maybe there is hope in the future. Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, I think it's a perfect system in Central Asia. Only flat tax income between 10 and 13. This is really heading for growth. This is very, very good. It's just amazing. And we need to do the same in Western Europe. And why? The Western Europeans also, they have less problems maybe with informality and they are already rich and they feel very happy about it. So let's say, how rich are the Western Europeans, the EU27 in that case, together? Yeah. And here, because 100 million are from Central Eastern Europe, and then you have 350 million Western and Southern Europeans. Yeah. So together, in average, EU27 is at, let's see, 36,000 GDP per capita. Obviously, you can say that 100 million rather poor Eastern Europeans have joined, and the Americans are at 62. By the way, the Americans have integrated 80 million new people are in America living compared to 30 years ago. 80 million plus in population, in overall population. It's quite enormous. Yeah? It's not that the Americans were not open in the last years. We have also done our part with EU enlargement. Very good. We were less open to the rest of the world, but EU enlargement, of course, a big factor. So where we stand with prosperity of the rich Western countries compared to the United States of America, when you see it state by state. And that's, I think, a good comparison. We are a political union, they are a political union. And then you see, when you divide the 50 states in single economic entity, then you have basically only Luxembourg is obviously super rich. Congratulations, Luxembourg. Then New York, much bigger than Luxembourg, obviously. But nevertheless, then you have Switzerland. It's also competing. Switzerland and Luxembourg are competing. And then you look, you see who is actually there. Then Qatar is also quite rich. And then Iceland is quite rich. And then you see only American states. Denmark is coming up. Very good. Denmark is one of them. And then under the 50 richest, 75 richest, then you have some Italy, you have suddenly at 75th position, UK at 69, and then you have Sweden 50, and so on and so on and so on. But it's not so wonderful actually. It's not that it would be so amazing that we see so many Austrians. Where is Austria? I have maybe cut that out actually. Then that's a different thing. Okay, my beloved Austrians may excuse me, but we're under the most first 50 richest. I have exactly only the Netherlands, Sweden, and Denmark and Luxembourg from the European Union. So we are not so super rich. We are not. Here is Austria actually in part of this European Union table. Austria at 51. 51 makes you somewhere with Florida on one level or with Sweden, yeah? So, and the position 49. So I have tried to make it as transparent as possible. I say Europe is much poorer than the United States. It's not exactly, it's about 57%, 55, yeah, compared. And when we see, that even Germany is not in that ranking so much under the best 50, yeah, that's not such a great result overall. We are not so rich when we compare to the rich world. Yeah, we are richer than Poland, and and then Romania, but we are really significantly lagging behind normal North American prosperity, and it's 70 years after the war, 75 years after the war. And it's not exactly that we can say, oh, the Second World War, oh, we had no, we had the division of Europe. Yes, obviously, but it's 30 years now. We could be better, and we see exactly where the problem was after the great financial crisis. The last decade, we have not really caught up so well. We have been less united. We had less flexible economy, and we didn't reduce the taxes. So I'm talking a lot about taxes, but just to be sure, I understand very much. It's also institutional challenges. It's also about enlargement. Yeah? I made this big list of all the organizations from NATO, WTO, OECD, Council of Europe, EU, NATO, and OECD, where we have not been open enough in the last 10 years. We had a freeze on WTO enlargement, on OECD enlargement, The whole conflict with Russia has basically paralyzed Europe in the last decade, and also the financial crisis additionally. And then we didn't enlarge the WTO. We have 6 countries in Europe which are not in WTO today. Yeah? Serbia, Kosovo, Bosnia, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and also then if you want to include Belarus, that's a bit of a question. I'm not so keen on Belarus at the moment, but a free Belarus to WTO? Yes, absolutely. And we have not included so much in OECD. We have blocked EU enlargement. We have just gradually now restarted NATO enlargement. And that's all very institutionally a major blockade on global growth and on the reform. And we have been a little bit paralyzed, and it's time to open the West. I understand that very much. But coming back to taxation, it's really true that we have made a complete blockade on this crucial question of tax, especially in Germany, Austria, and surprise, surprise, one of the worst performing countries was always France. But Macron, due respect to him, he has made a decision now to 2022 to reduce corporation tax to 25. That's not the 20% level I would recommend for France and for Germany and for Austria, but it's actually a very good first step. It's it's really real and it's good. But where is the German tax reform? And now we had the main candidate of the Social Democrats, the Minister of Finance, who is just taking another 100 billion of taxpayers' money to fund this crisis. But he has already announced that taxation reform and progressivity and higher taxes will be his political platform for 2021 election. So instead of really helping Europe by reducing taxes and helping the Germans most of all, and helping the whole global economy and reducing, like France is doing, they want to have higher corporate taxes in Germany. And that's a big problem. You see very well they are the biggest. Malta has a very much a biased it's a very small country, it doesn't matter so much, but ultimately it is very biased towards foreign investors. They pay very few with a lot of exemptions and loopholes in order to have a lot of collusion and corruption, but the normal SMEs pay 35. You see Germany, Belgium, France, Austria, 25 is too much in that context. Yeah, we need to have 20% in all these rich countries. A country like Greece would be much better off, like I say, since 15 years, with 10% taxation, but at least 15%. Yeah, Italy 15%. Yeah, the whole euro area in average about should be at 15%. Yeah, that is maybe less actually. Yeah, in average. Yeah, but 15 is the benchmark for the rich Western European countries, and maybe 20 can be as justified. Yeah, but certainly not the high levels we face in Western Europe, and then you come to the more reasonable countries when you see going, but also for Poland it should be 15%. Then we have Belarus with 18. No wonder it doesn't work. Yeah? Croatia with 18, too high. Ukraine 18, too high for a country so poor. It should be 10%. And then the more reasonable countries here start basically Cyprus, Ireland, Liechtenstein, very good, Moldova, and the perfect countries. I'm also happy I had hopefully some contribution to that. Bosnia, Bulgaria, Kosovo, Macedonia, Hungary, Montenegro. Isle of Man, I think actually is a bit too low. Also, Isle of Man should be at 10%. Yeah. Okay, we have progress, but we have major issues still in corporation tax, and that matters very much for how investment is lucrative, how fast it can return the invested capital. It makes a huge impact on growth, on prosperity, on employment. This is really the cost of capital imposed by the state. Yeah? And that's too high in Europe. Therefore, investment is not lucrative. Capital looks somewhere else. And we have seen what is happening in our case. And we can compare now with the really big success of the tax cuts in the United States of America. It was a historic achievement. The 20th December 2017 will live forever in the history of economics as the one day they really reduced the corporation tax after so many decades, basically since World War II, too high, much too high. Then Reagan reduced it to 35, and now came the time of 21. This is a historic achievement, and it really has led to a lot of capital moving into the United States back, which was parked in some offshore havens due to this really wrong tax system. And now it is back there. I'm not a big fan of President Trump, to be clear. That's why I don't put him on this picture. But he did many wrong things, but that was a central positive achievement next to the two new countries in NATO, Montenegro and North Macedonia. But and he did many wrong things. It's not about him now. I will make a separate video about that one. But this one was historic and it was decisive. And when now we have to see how we overcome this crisis of Corona, it's this major reform which has already in 18 and 19 led the really productivity increase and the growth increase in the United States. And it will be key to really get out of this crisis in 2021, because it is already on the good way and the growth numbers will pick up because of low corporate taxation. But it's not only corporate taxation. I talked a bit about it already in the beginning, but we have a massively too much taxation on labor in Europe compared to the United States. This is the graph on the left. The total tax revenue as a share of GDP, it's much too high in Europe. When you see this table from TPC, you have over 50% in France, completely wrong, but they have understood and made some improvements. In the United States, it's just half of it. Yeah? Where is the best number? Maybe the United States should also think about the VAT system and increase actually its total tax revenues, not and decrease its progressivity. That's my proposal for the United States. But in general, not to go too high on that total tax revenue is a very good idea. And somehow around 37, 35 OECD average, that is the level 35 probably. That would be really excellent to reach to fund the state. And I think that's the level we should achieve. And when you look at top individual tax rates in Europe, including employee social security contributions, you see where we are. With 47%, 40, and that's the 55 in France. You see all this kind of spectacular high numbers. It's not 8% in Portugal. I have to maybe disappoint you and make it 58. Okay, I will have to give that in the back in order to make clear that it's 58, so nobody gets the idea to move to Portugal because of low taxation. So then we have all these bad results. The Estonians and the Baltics are quite good, and we have and also. But when you look around, it's only in Eastern Europe where there is hope on faster growth, and we really have to get better. 60% overall in Sweden. That's all pretty bad, and it's all extremely high in Western Europe and very disappointing. You have then here Slovakia, very good, 35, Czech Republic, 30%, Lithuania, 30. This is very good, These are really great results, yeah. This is amazing, yeah. But this is actually ranked when you are number one, you are the worst. Who is the worst? I have to check that on top income tax rates. Oh, Slovenia, really very bad. Yeah, who is Belgium, really very bad. Yeah, Greece, no wonder, 55. Very bad. Who is the best countries? It's basically not Austria, obviously. Well, okay, you can see the map yourself. It's a pretty mess, our tax system on income, and it's really bad. You will already be acquainted with that one because it was my starting slide, but you can have a bigger look now and closer look on this kind of numbers again. I think it's getting more clearer. We're starting at a very low level already of yearly income. That means in the period of between 30 and 50,000, which is really not a millionaire's income. We start there to tax already like millionaires are taxed in France or in the United States. Yeah, we use this prohibitive high levels of 37, which the US has for people over half a million. We use 37 already from people for 18,000 euros. 18,000 euros, you pay 35% in Austria. When you look in America, in France, you have the 47. That's basically that equivalent, or only for people over 75,000. Yeah? And in Germany, you pay this level of Grenzsteuersatz. Here you see 42. It's in 50,000. You pay already 47.5. Yeah, almost 50. So explain me, is that fair? Because it's a real problem for the people to develop and to come up. So, to be clear, I recommend the 10% flat tax for countries in post-communist and post-socialist transition economies. Yeah? 10% makes you grow faster. It reduces informality. It is really the way to catch up to the richer West. And this is a very important. So all countries, and that's basically everybody outside the EU 15 in Europe, and also Africa, Latin America, Asia, a 10% flat tax is the best economic taxation system for countries in transition, because you grow faster, you build up an economic elite which really invests in the country, you also reduce informality, you build a new consensus with the taxpayers that they start to get clean and start to be part of the system. You have a public service level which is justifiable for 10% because your public services are not so good. So it's really very important to do that, and then at the same time to have a working European style VAT system with fiscal register in order to raise the revenue, and also to make sure that you basically have as minimum tariffs as possible. And that's the way to catch up and to be good. So 10% for countries in these post-socialist transition countries. I want to explain as well, it's always good to have a look on history, that the 3rd of March, I call it the European Day Against Progressive Taxation, because progressive taxation is funding wars. Yeah? The First World War was actually the moment of the introduction of progressive taxation. It was always called for in the Communist Manifesto of Marx. Yeah? That was basically the big idea, tax the rich, and the Marx and Engels have called for in the Communist Manifesto. But it really didn't materialize a lot in any kind of political systems. But the progressive movement in the United States has made a breakthrough then. In the year 1913, under President Wilson, they started with progressivity, but they started really very little progressivity. Just the principle was established. But then, they started because the First World War entry came and it started to be really a massive financial need. Then they started with corporate excise profit tax, massive progressive tax. It was really the one big moment when the federal budget in the US has exploded over 10 times, in this times, and it's really unbelievable. So it was the 3rd of March 1917 where this started. And you need it because basically we had a constant war. First World War, interwar years, World War II, Cold War. That was basically then the whole history of this tragic 20th century was funded with progressive taxation. And it's really wrong. If we want to have now some kind of normality, we have to reduce that to a state GDP level of 40%. That's justified. And for a modern welfare state and the modern needs of healthcare and everything, I will discuss in a second. But, we don't have to have more. Nobody outside of a constant war situation needs more than 40% of the public income and as a state. Yeah? That's really totally wrong. And we have to reduce and come back to a reasonable taxation system. Here, I reiterate a little bit the history of income taxation in the 20th century in Northern Europe and in America, and you see where it took off with the First World War, and then basically it never really came to a normality. Gradually, after the end of the Cold War, there was some improvements. Definitely, but still, we are beyond. In real terms, we are still very much too high in taxation. I call it the European Flat Tax Celebration Day. That's the 30th of October every year, where I hold and I call everybody to call a European Flat Tax Celebration Day. This is when the Slovak government of Mr. Dzurinda and Mr. Miklos, great heroes of freedom and of European progress, they have come to power, and they took over the power from Mejia, this pro-Russian oligarch, and they basically transformed with the flat tax and with a very good openness and reasonable reform. They reformed their country from the one which was basically not possible to join the European Union and NATO. They really went and made it with everybody else in 2004, and they led the country into the euro. They are really great heroes, and I'm very proud of them. And this is really the day that made all this difference possible. This was the 13th of October in the year 98, and when they started the new government, and congratulations. Good, that changed Eastern Europe, but of course, Western Europe continued its old ways because there was less pressure to change, because in a way, the high taxation was already priced in the market and wage system. So people got acquainted, prices was acquainted, everybody was rich, getting rich by European unification. So the situation was, of course, less for change. And there was all these social democratic dogmas about fair society. Christian Wolff, one of the worst persons, and his statement. There was the big debate about Kirchhoff, you might remember, and 2002, the year of hope, certainly for Germany. But then all the guys were getting crazy because they were not ideologically educated for the center-right, but they were just interested in their own enrichments. And they failed, basically, and they failed Europe with that. And it was really very, very bad. Yeah? And anyhow, we have this mess now with the German tax system and the Austrian tax system. And we are here now in 2020, and we still have to explain that the massive tax evasion which the German system leads by its high complexity and its high tax burden on labor. You see, Germany is the second one when it comes to tax burden on labor in Europe. It's a tax wedge, it's called in English. That's basically the burden on labor by taxation and social security. Number 2 is Germany, Belgium number 1. And when it comes to complexity of labor taxes in Europe, Germany under position 39. And that's also not very good. The Northern Europeans have at least, the complexity reduced, and that's very good. Average number of hours a business needs to comply with labor taxes 39. In Sweden it's 5, and they have higher taxation. So okay, good. It's wrong. And where it leads to tax evasion. Germany is the country in the EU. No, Italy is of course the worst. No doubt. Yeah, Italiane. They have no. They have 190 billions of revenue loss due to tax evasion. No, good. That's a world record, I guess. Yeah. Germany 125, and the Germans keep the rules. They say. France 120, and so on and so on and so on. You see the high taxation, the high complexity, and the lack of a consensus of the population, and that this is a reasonable system, leads to this massive evasion. Then you, of course, can put the police and more police and more police and more controls and more police. But ultimately the answer is lower taxes and lower complexity leads to less evasion, and then also with higher revenues. Yes, for the 24th of September, I called a EU day for taxing people less, because high taxes lead to high informality, and why tax and punish middle class labor so hard. It's not fair. The tax burden on labor leads, obviously, it's a kind of a gigantic system. You are in a wheel, you have to run. The faster you run, the more you have to run. And that's exactly the way our progressivity is leading. Not It just makes everybody tired. It doesn't lead to innovation. It's a break on innovation, it's a break on progress, and it's really not creating the fairness, because we all want fairness, equality of opportunity, we all want, yeah, but it's the equality of poverty, and equal for all, that cannot be the objective, because we should not have a tax policy as an instrument to create everybody with equal income. That's what we basically do in Germany and Austria. Everybody who is having 95% of the population who are having employment have more or less the same result in lifestyle, and then everybody says, where's my way out? Then of course they try to be, either they become part of the welfare system, or they are basically then trying to leave, or they try to manipulate, evade the system, or they try also then to go into the instruments of forming companies, but not for innovation reason, just to hiding wealth, and so on and so on. We are really in a mess here, and this needs to change. And it is also against the progressivity, in a sense of progress in a society, that you really change your social strata by work and by effort and by innovation, and that the tax system has to incentivize innovation and curiosity and progress, but not to have the result to that everybody is equally rich, because that's really leading to a massive loss of prosperity for everybody, and it's totally wrong system. So summing up, European tax policy, we need 20% VAT best for everybody, have minimum exemptions, have the VAT, the consumption tax is very fair tax. It's this whole left-wing ideology that this is against the poor. It's totally not true, because it is actually the more you consume, the more you pay VAT. So you need less exemptions here, and the smaller and the weaker strata of the society, which is really very price sensitive on consumption of basic food and good, are anyhow supported by the welfare system. Yeah, so it's actually totally wrong with this philosophy that VAT is bad, and we have seen that now in the crisis already. Very populistic. We do this kind of small manipulation downwards of the VAT, like if that would really change a lot. It is changing it's the wisdom of the big numbers. Basically, you have this very fair, widespread, easy to pay, easy to administer tax system of the VAT. That's the bulk of the revenues. And you have low corporation tax, low and flat income tax, and also energy import tax for strategic reasons. I will come back to that one. So that's basically how we have to have our tax system. And again, it must be under the really principle of competitiveness. Growth matters. And you see, for example, Germany has again, some advantages in its tax system. It's relatively competitive. France is very uncompetitive, and Poland, interestingly. the populists have led to a very uncompetitive tax system. When you put the overall system, the complexity, the rates, the different, then you come to interesting relations. Yeah, it's not that the Polish have really performed so well, as I say, since 15 years, because contrary to the other Visegrad countries, they were not listening to European tax reform advice. So European tax policy, what is important? Keep the VAT flat at 20. We have some countries who went really very high in the VAT, like Hungary. That was also a mistake. Yeah, the idea is not to take it to 27. Keep it at 20. That's really good, and keep it simple, fair, digitalized. Make it transparent. Make it a European-wide and transparent. Basically, the same rate everywhere. It's much better. So, in all this debate about taxation, then came all this anti-Americanism of this idea of a digital tax. Yeah, that's really wrong. Digital tax is is just a kind of a trade conflict in the future with the Americans, because we were not innovative enough. Most of our guys went to America, built up great companies, or contributed to their innovation spirit. Then they conquered the globe with the global services like Google, Apple, and others. And then we are jealous and we want to additionally tax them. That really leads only to a trade conflict. And we don't need a trade conflict. We need a free trade agreement with the USA. So what we need is to cancel all this, and then to make an adaptation of the corporation tax. These companies should pay corporation tax like everybody else, and that's really very good. And lower corporation tax, I will say. And then we have this point done. And when it comes to the carbon tax, not a border adjustable mechanism for everybody. The carbon is one important topic, no doubt, but the most one is to get less carbon from the Russians. They are a hostile state, we shouldn't fund them. I made a long presentation about that one as well. So tax the Russian carbon and the Russian uranium and everything energy-wise which comes from Russia. That's quite a lot already. That will help to fund the Just Transition Fund, but certainly not for everybody in the world, the kind of green imperialist carbon adjustable tax, which again will lead only to a major conflict at the WTO, to less free trade in the world, and to a big crisis, which we really don't want, because what we want is less Russian dirty carbon in Europe, and that can be made more expensive, even very much more expensive, no problem. And by the way, don't build Nord Stream 2. If you really are so interested in less carbon in Germany and in Austria, then please don't build Nord Stream 2. Good. The recovery plan, I've made the point already, with the Russian gas, that's really the most important issue. And we can have a 10% EU energy independence contribution to fund the energy transition. That's justified and fair, but take it from the Russians. European tax policy, let's be very clear. We have to tax property higher, but not at death, but yearly. So it's very good system to tax property. You cannot move. It's very good system to tax wealth. Don't start with big progressivity. I'm also against that. But assess the value correctly. The property value is rising yearly in all these rich economies. So take a small apartment in Vienna for maybe 150, maybe 300 to up to 300,000. Take the real market value, attach a small but yearly property fee, and that's very fair. And that's justified. And so you can tax the super rich as well. At the moment of consumption, in the time and when they live in super villas, they obviously pay very high property taxes. Yeah? And that's the way to fund most of the local services, and that's very, very good. Yeah. But no inheritance taxes, At death, this whole jealousy politics, he had rich parents, he had advantages, and, then we have all these companies with huge tax liabilities. When what you really want is to let this company continue to add prosperity and employment in Europe. And so we have really total wrong concept. No inheritance taxes, but to have real property taxes. And we have too low property taxes in Europe mostly, and we have too high taxes for inheritance. We shouldn't have any tax for inheritance. We should only have property taxes, and the people who inherit the property, they pay then this high property tax. Yeah, they have also some income, revenue, or some reason to use that property, so they put it basically in that business plan. European tax policy, tax competition is a force of progress. There's a lot of left-wing philosophy entering also the center-right that tax policies and tax competition is something bad. No, it's something good. See the OECD average, really it has decreased under Reagan and now since the victory in Cold War, that was really very good. And see also, I have put it in contrast here together. This is the global prosperity since 1990 when we were winning the Cold War, and then it was 22 trillion in the world, and it's now 86, the global GDP output. And the corporation tax decreased, the global output massively increased, and the global prosperity massively increased by that. And that's the trend that has to continue. But, in some areas, coordination very good, especially VAT. That should be basically the same VAT system all over the European continent, also after CEFTA, Ukraine, ERP, everywhere. That's very good because when you get all this kind of arbitrage opportunities, different tax rates and complications at the borders, it's very complicated and it's a lot of abuse. So we need a coordinated tax policy on the European level for the VAT, and we need competition on the issue of tax rates especially, and that we need globally, and no kind of coordination in corporation tax or income tax, only benchmarking in order to reduce. So how to fund the state? You will say, Günther's proposal, then we will all be poor, the state will be out of money, that's really terrible. No, on the contrary, we will have exactly the 40 state to GDP optimum, and we should reach exactly that one after the crisis again. We have with 40% of the GDP, there's enough revenue to fund 7% for education, 7% for health, 7% for pension system, 7% for social welfare system, 1% for debt, 1% for regions, 1% for judiciary, 1% for infrastructure, 3% for economy, energy, climate, agriculture, environment, 2% for defense, and 2% for global contribution, EU contribution, and all non-EU members should pay in a different fund, because that's really should be for all countries. There's enough global governance to be funded and global development. 1% for the global governance from EU member states, and so it adds up to 40. And with 28%, 4% of education, health, and pension and social welfare, that's already huge amounts of money. It's really with 40% you are competitive and you can have a welfare state of European dimension, but in a reasonable level. And that's what I think is decent. And we see that also France, Italy, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Austria, far above the 40%. It starts to get reasonable here with Poland, Spain, UK. That's the 40%. And that 40% should be also after now there's this expansion and this debt crisis of the corona, then it should be reduced exactly to this 40%. And that should be benchmarked also in all European levels. I repeat, it's the peace level. When there is really kind of big aggression and war and mobilization, let's do more. There is obviously then, but the idea is basically 40% of the GDP that we should reach in the 2020s again, and we should benchmark all countries, we should work with them, that really 40% is what can be achieved, and that's a very important task for the European Commission and the OECD. I add myself, I conclude, SME policy, that's of course the idea, what I said already, low taxation to have a broad-based economic development driven by SMEs, not by big corporates, industrialization a la Stalin, European champions. No, we all don't want it. We want openness, good competition enforcement, open markets for goods and for labor. This is really the prosperity which is needed. We need the European Customs Union to enlarge the freedom on the CEFTA and the EU regulatory framework as far as possible. Property rights, European cadastre, working contracts, open and flexible labor markets, and reducing the state power over the economy, this kind of collusive power, this corruptive power by this huge GDP to state rates. And strong competition, a European competition system which is really enforced also with line authority of the DG competition over the national regulators, and no more political collusions into from Slovakia. We have seen that towards Malta and in many countries, Poland and Hungary, very problematic. And of course, we have to have one currency in all Europe as much as possible. Wherever we have low inflation, we have no currency risk, no petty manipulation, and of course, we need low taxations, best flat tax 10 and the EU-wide harmonized 10%. That's SME policy, that's SME strategy, that will provide Europe with the growth we need, and that's basically the idea of European SME policy, entrepreneurship, innovation, growth, power by the many, and less brake on growth. Yeah? And the fuel SME agency, let me just make the point as well. So I call it the lost $12 trillion dollar question. Sorry for saying dollars, but you know it's a global currency. We will also not be the competitor to the dollar, but we will be an important contributor to global monetary stability in combination with the dollar. And we have to ask us why Europeans are not as rich as Americans. And when you count the Europeans as the GDP level of North America, then you would have 12 trillion global GDP more. That's about what China has added in the last 20 years. So it's totally possible to really add 12 trillion in the next 20 years to European prosperity. But we need lower taxes, we need a lower state to GDP ratio, we need to change our mentality. But first of all, we need more unity, we need also more kind of openness in Europe, but also it starts all of it with more with lower taxes. Yeah. So I want to conclude now this small presentation about where we really stand with the Americans, and we should reach North American prosperity level. I have said the last 10 years were not so good for European prosperity compared to the American one. We fell back because we were not open enough. We made a lot of mess on CETA with the Canadians. We stopped the American Free Trade Agreement. We have basically been paralyzed in the last 10 years because of many issues, from financial crisis, debt crisis, and then the migration crisis, the Russian intervention in Ukraine, and in the United Kingdom with the Brexit intervention, and a lot of opposition towards European unification and a lack of leadership. And then we have to be more open, we have to be more united, we have to enlarge the European Union, and we have to reform our taxation system and really to catch up with North American prosperity level. The missing $12 trillion question, it is answered by lower taxes, more openness, and more unity in Europe of 37, including Ukraine and the Balkans. This is the way for European prosperity for the next decade to come and for many decades afterwards. And I call on the European authorities, cut your taxes, be competitive, be more united, be more open, and really this is the way for prosperity for the European continent. Thanks a lot.